This lecture is going to talk to you about the concept essay, which is your research-based essay in our class. So a concept is an abstract element. It's a thing that you can't literally see and touch and hold. It's something like success or courage or fulfillment, love, faith, anything that's subjective where any person can have a different perspective as to what that means to them. So you're going to choose your concept, this abstract element, and you're going to put your spin on it. You're going to define it for us and explain your terms of what this concept is. How does it take on your perspective? Again, this is something that can mean different things to different people, so there's no one right or wrong way to do this. In writing your essay, you need to have a focused explanation. This means you have to identify your concept. What does it mean to you? You'll need to give a definition. Perhaps if you're going to use a dictionary or a source, that will be one of your sources to cite. Explain it, describe it. What does this concept look like? What does it feel like? What does it seem like? Maybe you can give the different perspectives of what it might mean to some person versus another person. You might want to open your essay with a story to draw in the reader, an anecdote, kind of just set the stage for what it is you're going to talk about, and then get to the business of what is this concept. In doing so, you're going to have a thesis. This is a thesis-driven paper versus the last two essays that we've done, which were driven by a dominant impression. You didn't have one single statement that said what your remembered event was about or that said what your profile was about. Rather, you had just a general impression or a feeling of your spiritual journey that ran throughout the essay, or a feeling of whatever your feeling or your perspective is that went through your profile essay. This concept essay is different. At the beginning of your essay, you will have a thesis statement that says specifically what your paper will be about and what your perspective is. And we'll get into that in another minute. So, what is a thesis, you ask? It's one, sometimes two, main sentences that will state what your entire essay is going to be about. And it's very important that anything else you write about in your essay should be able to relate back to the thesis statement. Okay? Well, how is this different from the dominant impression? It's different in that, like I said, the dominant impression was just a general feeling all through your essay. There was no one specific statement. The second element of the grading for your concept essay is a readable plan. This means that you have to kind of set the stage for what your essay is going to cover, okay? And even do so much as to tell the reader in your introduction all of the things you're going to cover in the essay. Give them a plan, give them a direction for where it's going to go. You will want to divide your paper into paragraphs that differentiate between each of these subtopics of your concept. You want to present them, if there's a way to do it, in a logical order. Probably concepts don't really relate to chronological order, but if you can put them in some sort of category so that they flow logically, please try to do that. You want to use topic sentences for each of your paragraphs to cue the reader. Example is the use of transition words. First of all, blah, 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 blah. Another paragraph would say, in addition, or another part of this concept is this. Furthermore, these are all transition words that cue the reader with the direction of your essay. And so it's expected that you'll be using these throughout your paper. Another part of the rubric that's going to go through for the concept essay is your appropriate explanatory strategies. That means, and this is where your reading will come in. Okay, the St. Martin's Guide will go through these. If you need to give definitions, if there's any kind of vocabulary or key terms that are related to your concept, you want to make sure and provide those definitions. You want to assume the general rule of thumb is that the reader knows nothing. Even though that may not be the case, you still want to be very thorough and don't assume that the reader knows exactly what you're talking about. You want to lay the foundation for adequate information. Perhaps you're going to think about Is my concept something that I can classify into groups or categories, and then I can use paragraphs that way to relate my material or my information? Perhaps you're going to compare and contrast ideas. Think about what maybe someone might disagree with you in this particular concept. Maybe you're talking about faith as a concept, and you say, well, some people might think faith is this, and then you want to refute. Well, I would disagree. I say faith is that. So you could use it as a compare and contrast. You might want to tell a story, like I already mentioned. That's a good way to open up your essay. Sometimes it's really difficult with how do I get a paper started. And so opening up with an example of a story or some rhetorical questions, like a series of questions to get the reader thinking about a topic, that could be something to use. You want to provide supporting examples and evidence for whatever your point is. You'll have to support it. Again, your research will be helpful for that. Perhaps you want to use cause and effect. Depending on what your concept is, that could work for you. However, please note that a substantial portion of your grading for this essay is to use at least 2 or more. I would say definitely use 3 of these different explanatory strategies. You want to think about your purpose for writing your essay and think about your audience that's reading your essay. Ask yourself these questions. When you're thinking about your audience, obviously it's me, it's your peers in your class, perhaps your family. Think about, what can you assume about them? Are they going to have any kind of general knowledge about perhaps they have a general idea about your concept, but maybe not a clear knowledge, or maybe not the same perspective that you have. So you want to assume that we may not be interested in this concept. So you have to think about, how do you engage us? How do you make this topic interesting for your reader? And then plan to add the prior knowledge or provide a new perspective. Maybe we do have knowledge, but you want to give us a fresh perspective with how to look at your concept. Then you want to think about your purpose. Why are you writing this essay? Why did you choose this concept? Is it to teach us about a concept that's unfamiliar to us? Is it to interest the person in your perspective, just to show them a different way to look at something? Or is it to show that you know a lot about this concept and you have the experience and the expertise to show us how to apply this knowledge to this concept? Just asking yourself these questions can give you an idea about, how am I going to write about something? Why do I want to write about something? And as a little change of direction here, we're going to talk about the C.S. Lewis article just for a moment. I want you to perhaps save this screen here and then come back to it. And after you read it, these are some examples that Lewis uses as the strategies in talking about his concept. Okay, on page 135, you'll see how he gives a definition of theology. And you'll also see that he tells a story about, I remember once when this happened, and it's an anecdote. You'll also see a strategy of comparing and contrasting the difference between begetting and making, okay? You'll also see that he classifies and groups the related material, talks about bios and zoes. So those are all different strategies that are illustrated in this article. You can see how they're used and then model that when you're writing your concept essay. I'm throwing out some possible topics. As long as it's related to society somehow, I don't have a preference of what you do. This is your essay. It's your concept and it's your perspective on it, so you do whatever you want with it. As long as you're passionate about it and interested, I think that's going to be great. Don't choose something that you just really don't care about, because you probably won't. It'll show in your essay. So again, you can come back to these and look at them and kind of mill them over and see what interests you. I've got 2 pages here of topics, and I'll post this as just the PowerPoint so that you can just look at the PowerPoint later on. As long as it's related to society, it doesn't really matter what you choose. Now, keeping that in mind, society is a broad topic. Okay, you're not writing about society, but your concept has to relate to society somehow. Another reminder, this is not a how to do something, how to make something. It's just a concept, generally talking about what something is. You want to make sure to submit your draft to your partners. You're going to do peer editing. You want to give enough time to send it to someone in order to get their feedback. And again, if somebody sends it to you, please be courteous enough to get them feedback promptly so that they can work on their revisions. You're going to use 3 solid outside sources of research. And now let's talk about creating a thesis statement, because I know this is one of the most difficult things for a writer to do. And especially if sometimes writing doesn't come naturally to you, this can really just put the writer's block right in place. And I would encourage you also to come up with a thesis or a couple of different things of what you think are going to be your thesis and email them to me and say, hey, is this even a thesis? Is this going to work? And I would be happy to, you can text them to me, you can email it to me, and I'd be happy to give you my opinion. So to compose your thesis, first you're going to have your topic, figure out what your perspective is, and then come up with your statement. Thesis, what is a thesis? I just really don't know. Again, it's 1 or 2 sentences. Usually in the introduction, it's not necessarily the very first sentence in your paper. That's a little bit too much. You don't want to jump in just head first. You want to ease the reader into your topic, but it's still going to be in your introductory paragraph, probably maybe like closer to the last sentence in your paragraph. So once you think you have your thesis statement, you need to ask yourself these questions. Is this something I can write my entire paper about? Got to be able to say yes to that. If you can't, then we need to go back to the drawing board. Is it too broad? Am I going to be writing forever and ever? Can I cover this? Is it too narrow? Is it something I can prove with research? And does it include my opinion? So I wrote some examples for you, just general examples. So the first one says, love is a concept that can mean many things to many people. However, love is not just a feeling. It is an emotion, a behavior, and a daily choice that can bring about many benefits to one's life. So in that thesis statement, it is 2 sentences, but that's okay. You can see that it's general. I'm just introducing the concept of love, saying it means many things to many people. But then I say it's an emotion, a behavior, a choice of life that can bring about benefits. So I would be expected in my essay to have a paragraph about each of these things. I would want to give a definition of love, give my perspective of love, and then I'd have a paragraph about how love relates to emotions, how I feel like love relates to people's behavior, how what are choices in a daily life, like actions that I would take. I would have a whole paragraph about that. And then I would have paragraphs about the benefits. So if I think I can do that, that would work. Another example of a concept would be autism related to society. Autism is a rapidly increasing childhood diagnosis that can greatly impact a family in several different ways. And notice I left that several different ways as a really general opportunity for me to then have many paragraphs of what would be those different ways. Okay, so I open with it, I'd give a definition, I'd give maybe some research about what is autism, how does it get diagnosed, what are the statistics of how many people have it, how it's more prevalent, and then all of my paragraphs supporting that would talk about how it impacts the family, and I would include my perspective if I have an opinion about that and I have relative experience with it. Just a few other odds and ends to cover. Please make sure that you smoothly integrate your sources. It can be very difficult to write with research. Know the difference between quoting something, paraphrasing, and summarizing. Okay, quoting is when you put exact words down and you put quotation marks around them, and you have to give credit to where that source comes from. Paraphrasing is when you take that information and you just kind of change the words around, put it, you don't have to put the quotes, and you just kind of keep the facts the same, but you just restate it a little differently. And then summarizing is when you take all of the general ideas and you condense it way down, but you're still needing to give credit to where that source comes from. And regardless of what you do, you have to cite everything. The rule of thumb is if it's not common knowledge, you have to cite your source. And when you're not sure, cite it anyway, because you never want to be considered plagiarizing. That's definitely a no-no. Here are your resources for looking for how to use your MLA or APA format. I don't mind which you use. You can choose whatever you're more comfortable with, but just be consistent with whatever you use. And please use these resources for how to use your quotation marks, your parenthetical citation, how to make a works cited page. You will be expected to have a works cited page with your resources at the end. So please take a look at this. Again, I'm happy to help you if you have any